We're going to start with a pose called Sukhasana, or an easy sitting pose. A quick note about the naming convention of yoga poses. There's an English name and there's a Sanskrit name. Sanskrit is an ancient, or some people say sacred, language of India going back ages, and it was used to write down and compile first historical text on yoga. A lot of the poses that you will encounter in yoga have a Sanskrit name. And essentially it means something like bounded revolved triangle, one hand in front of the other, and so on and so on. So the names of the poses, once translated, are actually quite simple. However, for the English speaking person, the names can be quite challenging to pronounce. So in my class, I'm going to provide an English name and also a Sanskrit name. So the first pose that we're going to be learning is called Sukhasana. The word asana stands for a pose, means the easy sitting pose. Any yoga practice can be paralleled or compared to a song. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And how all of those pieces tie together has been distilled over the ages into a set of best practices. Many different teaching styles, many different yogis have worked over the ages and came up with a set of guiding principles. So what I'm going to be teaching you is basically based on those guiding principles, infused with my own personal style and my practice. So, just like a song, we have to start somewhere. In our sequence, the sequence that we're building over the next 14 days, we are going to start in an easy sitting pose. Now, if you haven't sat on the floor for a while, you will probably find that just sitting on the floor in a very usual pose is very challenging. Most people tend to sit on the floor with their legs crossed or maybe outstretched. When you sit like that, and especially if you spend all of your time sitting on a chair or on a couch, you will undoubtedly start feeling the muscles of your lower back and the upper back starting to get a little bit more tiring. They start contracting, and you will feel that it requires quite an effort to keep your spine nice and tall. You start feeling it in your lower back, maybe you start slouching forward. It's just not a very comfortable pose. It's not the same feeling that you had as a child when you were sitting on the floor playing with dolls or trucks on the floor for hours. So we are going to have to relearn how to sit on the floor. Hopefully, or thankfully rather, we have our friend a pillow or a towel. So for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to be using a bolster or a pillow, and you can use the same thing. So the number one trick here in the sitting pose is to sit on a pillow. So sitting on a pillow helps us elevate our hips so that our hips are naturally higher than our knees. Now, most people don't have flexible hips right off the get-go. So it's perfectly fine to place your legs in a cross-legged position and have your shins rest on your ankles. And essentially, this is the easy sitting pose. So pelvis or your sits bones are situated on a pillow. Ankles are resting, shins are resting on your ankles, and the hands are on your knees. Now you can have your hands clasping the knees, or you can have the palms facing upwards. When you have the palms facing upwards, it tends to open up your shoulders a little bit more, which I'm going to get to in a second. So try it out. You kind of have to wiggle your way into this pose. Also experiment what happens when you remove the ankles from under your shins and let your knees drop a little bit further into the floor. You will notice that your pelvis will start moving forward and you're going to have a bit more curvature in your lower back. This may not be a very comfortable position right off the get-go, so you may want to go back into this form of an easy sitting pose. So once you've built out your foundation, then let's focus our attention on our shoulders. We want to lift the shoulders, drive them back, and depress or lower our shoulder blades. And then what we want to do here is we want to lift up our chin and drive it back, placing the hands on the knees, possibly palms facing upwards. And essentially, this is our easy sitting pose. It may feel very uncomfortable, or it actually may feel very natural to you, depending, again, on the flexibility and the openness of your body. Now, what's happening in this pose is worthy of mentioning. You are essentially aligning your spine in a straight line. So, instead of having your spine in a crooked, slouching way and engaging the muscles of your back to lift and straighten everything up, you're essentially distributing the weight of your body, the weight of your torso, along your spinal column. So having your spine in a nice straight line, or as straight as it possibly can, it's an S curve, you are essentially relieving the muscles of your spine from all the extra hard work they do to keep everything straight. So that's why propping your pelvis on a pillow has the great and positive effect of really aligning and straightening up your spine. So play around with this. You can also, if you want to really feel the difference, remove the pillow from under your sit bones and see how that feels. You'll probably feel that in order for you to really maintain a nice straight spine, you really have to push or exaggerate the curvature on your lower back, which, trust me, after sitting for a minute or two like that, it will become very taxing. So that's why we are going to start our practices by sitting on a pillow, cross-legged position, palms on our knees, rolling back the shoulders, lifting up the chin, and fixing our gaze along a straight line somewhere into the distance. Now do this with me. Situate yourself. You may need to wiggle a little bit to get into this pose. And once you feel that you've achieved a relatively comfortable state of being in this pose, close your eyes. Notice your breath. Notice how different it feels to breathe in this pose, because you're not slouching forward and your chest is nice and open because your spine is straight. You can breathe much more easily and you can fill up your lungs much more effectively and easily as well with air. And breath is something that I'm going to come back in the next lesson. So for now, just experiment a little bit more with this pose. Notice how it feels and try to spend about 1 or 2 minutes sitting in this pose and see where you're starting to feel a bit of a tension, a little bit of where your muscles are starting to get tired. They will, but that's the whole point. Yoga is a physical form of exercise, amongst other things. So even an easy sitting pose with time can be taxing. So give it a couple of minutes and I'll see you in the next lesson.